Welcome, welcome. This is the Enlightenment Show, and I'm your host, Laurie Schoenfeld. This is where Chicken Soup for the Soul meets the artist way with Nancy Drew. Our guest today is Teri Brown, author of Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. We're going to be chatting with her today all about her new release and something that's been passed down for generations in her family tree. Welcome, Teri.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. What is something that is calming in this season of your life?
Calming. The ocean. So I live near the ocean now, which is something that I have been trying to do pretty much since 1975. I grew up in Athens. I didn't grow up. I was born in Athens, Greece, and I lived there for 2 years and apparently spent a lot of my time near the ocean, but I have no recollection of it. The first time I remember seeing the ocean was in 1975. I was 12 years old, and I was overwhelmed with the beauty and everything. And I have been moving closer and closer to the ocean. For years, I lived about 2.5 hours away, and now I live 8 minutes away. I'll never get my husband to move any closer. He's a civil engineer, and he just says, why would you throw your money away so that the hurricane could knock it right down? And so this is probably as close as I'm getting. But I can get up every day, and I can go walk on the beach if I want to. And there's something so calming about the fact that those waves come in and out and in and out, and they do it every day, all day long. And even if my life is in like complete turmoil and everything is just churned and I can look at that ocean and it's still doing the very same thing, in and out. And it's going to do that tomorrow, and it's going to do that next week, and it's going to do that next year. And when my problem has finally resolved, it's still going to be doing that. And there's just something really peaceful. And
The words that kept coming to me was like,
it's going to happen. It just keeps happening. And it's not always the same every day. Some days it comes in a little more angrily than other days, and some days it kind of like slips in, but it still happens. And you can count on it. And you can chart it. When the tide is going to be high and when it's going to be low, and you just know. And there's something, I think, especially when your own life is like in turmoil for whatever reason, or even just your mind is like really racing, to know that there's something out there that is, you can just count on. It's going to do it. You can guarantee, like if it says it's high tide and you walk out there, it's going to be high tide. And there's just something really calming to me about that. And then the sounds are just lovely too. The it's a constant noise, but it's not that white noise that drives me crazy. Like, I can't stand a white noise. I start hearing sounds in white noise. Like I make up patterns in white noise, but I don't do that with the ocean because it changes just enough. There's that flowy sound, but it changes each time, so it doesn't allow my mind to like find some pattern in it, and it just de-escalates me every time. So if I'm really having a tough day, it's like, let's go walk on the ocean. Let's just go walk. And I might start out striding, and then by the time I get to the end of I'm just breathing again. Yeah, there's just something lovely about it. So yeah, that's it right there.
I love, there's so much that you said there that I love, Teri. My mind is going because like just the essence of the ocean and like letting it, I like how you mentioned some days it's a little more angry, right?
Yeah.
Of just letting it be in the element of whatever it's feeling, and like we connect to that emotion in some way.
Yeah.
With the water.
And then I also can kind of visualize like whatever angst I'm holding on to kind of flowing back out with the water. Like, it comes in, it kind of like swirls around my feet, and then it sucks it all back out again. And you can almost just feel that bad flow of energy just kind of out into the waves. I almost feel bad about anyone out there swimming. Like, oh, I hope they don't get caught up in all of my turmoil. around them like a fishing net or something. It's like,
I think you just kind of walked us through a lovely meditation too there, Teri. I'm going to use that later. Like blowing it back into
blowing it back out. It just goes right back out. Yeah. So
can you share with our listeners and viewers what Sunflowers Beneath the Snow is all about?
So it's about 3 generations of Ukrainian women. And the crazy thing is that it came out in January, right before this current Ukrainian crisis. And, I've been asked, how did you know? And it's like, oh, that's just not the way publishing works. I did not know. I was not able to predict when there was going to be a war. But the kinds of things that have been going on in Ukraine with Russia is not new. It may feel new to those of us who haven't been paying attention because, Russia and Ukraine are far from our borders. And so we don't really often note what's happening there. But this has been an ongoing issue for generations. And so anyway, the story starts in 1973. Ukraine is part of the Soviet Union. And we just kind of follow these 3 generations of women. And at the same time, we're also following the evolution of Ukraine going from Soviet to becoming independent, early independence, which was not an easy thing for Ukraine, later independence, and then when Russia invaded in 2014. And then it's so crazy that, of course, they've invaded again now. And what we're doing is we're following these women, and we get to see, I think for me, the biggest thing is watching how, despite these horrific circumstances that they find themselves in, they still have hope. And they still live their lives, and they still, try to become, I know in my mind, my thought is if you're standing in a bread line waiting for bread and milk, that your life is miserable and you're doing nothing but feeling misery. When the truth is that they were getting married and they were having children and they were raising their families and they were living life. And I like that idea that, especially the women, how despite these horrific circumstances, they find a way to make what they have into something worth living.
Mm-hmm. What inspired you, Teri, to take the concept of writing the story about 3 Ukrainian women and really sitting down and making it to what it is?
So it is loosely based on a real story. The youngest generation is someone that I know. It isn't. When she read the book, I begged her to remember that it was not her. So, but she came to my home in 2016 and told me an incredible story of something that happened to her. And it gave me goosebumps. It was so crazy, so crazily incredible. So I tell people that I wrote 82,000 words of fiction so I could tell 3 pages of truth. So the last 3 pages of the last chapter, and so I can't give it away because it would give away the entire story, but those last 3 pages actually happened. Not the epilogue, but the last chapter. And I then just kind of created a story around how could that have ever happened? And I just created this story. And I love generational stories when I read them. So it made sense to make this a generational story. And I think the reason I love generational stories is because you can see the differences in how different people who've been through different things see the very same consequence, right? So like there's so many times where I have the youngest generation who is constantly, harping on her father, and her father is making all of these comments, and she's like, why do you even care, Dad? We're free now. What is your problem? Why are you still talking about it? And that kind of came to me when I started thinking about like 9/11. It means something very specific to me. I know where I was. I know what I was thinking. I know what I was thinking for the next several days. I can tell you stories. As soon as I think about it, I have those feelings that are just, my children were young, but they remember, but they have a different take on it, right? And my grandchildren don't know what it is yet. Now they'll get older and go to school and they'll learn, but it won't be something that touched them. And when I have great grandchildren, they really won't know. And when I talk about it to them, they're going to do exactly what I did when my grandparents talked about living through the Depression. They're going to roll their eyes and they're going to say to themselves, are we talking about this again? Right? And so I love being able to do that, because generations, it is not that the younger generation is stupid or that they don't have feelings or emotions. It's that they didn't live it in a way that it touched them. And so to be able to play those generations off of one another, I just love it, because it allows you to explore the same concept from a lot of different angles.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because just as you're talking, I'm thinking about my teens. Years ago, I was telling them about some of my favorite things in the 90s that I wore, and like trends and music and all this stuff. And about 5 years ago, my oldest was like, that is horrible and awful and disgusting. Like, why would you do that? And now it's coming back, and it's a whole different perspective, almost like I never experienced it because
Right.
it's hers, right? Like, this is her stage of life, even though we have.
Right. And it's interesting, because it makes you also go back and think about, like, as I was writing this, I started thinking about, wow, I did this very same thing to my grandparents. I remember them talking about the Depression and thinking, if we have to talk about this one more time, there is no more Depression. We do not have to fold up the tinfoil and save it. Like, I don't want to hear about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what happens. It isn't that I don't think I was a horrible teenager. I just was tired of hearing about something that simply did not affect my life at all. Now,
Right.
and I was too young to understand how it had changed the world, right? All I saw it was from my perspective, which is move on. That was decades ago. Why are you still talking about it? You know, and so it's a fun concept to be able to, like, bring in those different perspectives, because people do see things very differently based on where they were when that event happened. You know, where were they in their own life and their own development? So
yeah, it's that whole, I feel, connection piece of actually experiencing and like experiencing it through your eyes and feeling and taking in the smells and the whole thing of connecting personally.
Right. And then, like I said, different ages. My children were very young. My youngest was 3, and her recollection of it is she remembers there were some bad things happening on the television.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's a very different concept than what my 12-year-old experienced. Right? Which is still a very different thing than what I experienced. You know, as a mom with small children, I was terrified. I was terrified beyond like, I look back now and I think I was irrationally afraid, because we didn't live in a big city and we didn't live somewhere where anything was going to happen. And yet anytime I heard a loud noise, I felt like gathering my children and hiding under the bed. Right. And I know it's irrational. Like, I look now and I say that was irrational, but it's where I was. And of course, my children weren't in that spot because they weren't parents, you know, so it's just how you look at things, you know, so yeah, I love exploring that in books, and generational stories are a great way to do it, because it automatically gives you characters that saw things from different angles or didn't see them at all and now only have to hear about them and roll their eyes at their father, you know. So
yeah, I love how you put in your book adding the 3 generations, because it also had me thinking, reading the book, that each character in there has something that the others can learn, something to share, something of value.
Right.
So often we forget, like, yes, you know, if somebody has been around for 80 years, they've seen and experienced a lot more, but also not to forget that the experiences of the younger generation, there's still things that are being seen, felt, heard, to bring to the table, to connect and build a community.
Exactly, because often at the point that you're the 80-year-old and you've experienced so many things, there's a lot of things now that are happening that you're no longer really part of that scene anymore. So you don't see it from that. You might see a clip on the news or whatever, but it's not something that you are actually experiencing, whereas, you know, this young person is actually experiencing it. They can bring something to the discussion that's very different, you know. And so if we would open up and allow ourselves to hear one another, because everybody has a different view, and I think that's true even of people who are of the same age, but we have different life experiences. You know,
Yes.
this idea that you say to someone, well, you can't have felt that because it never happened to me, just
Mhm.
doesn't make sense, because it doesn't, so it happening to someone else does not negate your own experience. Like,
Right.
just because I've never had that happen to me doesn't mean it's never happened. It just means it never happened to me. And so I could learn something by listening to someone that it did happen to. And they could learn something from me, from someone that it never happened to. You know, we could
Mhm.
learn from each other. And I think we get very wedded to our experience, and that our experience must be like the holy grail of all experiences, you know.
Mhm.
and and it is for our own development, but it isn't the only experience. You know, every person in the world has seen something slightly different. Have you ever heard about like people who are in a bank robbery, and the police officer comes in and asks them to describe what happens, and it's not the same? You
No.
know,
Mhm.
different words are shouted. The guy's different heights that came in and robbed them. One of them says that he was one color, one says he was another. Someone else said he was wearing blue, and someone else said he was in all black. I mean, and they were all in the very same room. But what happens is that you focus on different things based on who you are, what role you were playing in all of the commotion that was going on, past experiences with people and things and events, and then what you
Mhm.
remember is going to be different. And it's the same, you know, just across people in general. So I think it's really a good
Mhm.
idea to be able to stop and listen. You know, what was your experience?
Mhm. Absolutely agree. This is your debut novel.
Yes, it is.
Tell us about the process of writing Sunflowers Beneath the Snow.
So, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, I got the idea in 2016. But at the time, I was living in an emotionally abusive relationship and had no belief in myself whatsoever. And I was not writing fiction of any kind. I was doing a little nonfiction writing for small businesses, but I had been told point blank, just because you can write fiction doesn't mean you can write nonfiction. And I had no belief that I could write a story that could tell this unbelievable thing that I had been told. I finally left that marriage in 2017, and immediately the characters that had been in my head, like, released, and I started writing. And I wrote several manuscripts, and most of them will probably never see the light of day, even if I were to try to go back and change them. There are so many problems with them. But what they did was I like the first one just taught me that I had that many words in me. You know,
Mhm.
that I actually could write a story that had that many words. Because I've always written articles, you know, 600, 1,000, maybe 1,500 words. And it's like, can you write that many words? Do you even have that in you? But my characters
Mhm.
were so flat. Um, that my main character was perfect, absolutely perfect. I couldn't allow her to have any problems whatsoever. She reminds me of those the lifeguards, like in the Baywatch type shows, you know, that would dive into the water and come up all gorgeous, you know, with their makeup and their hair. And when in reality, most women try to run into the ocean, they get to almost their knees, they trip, they fall, they come up with seaweed and hair all in their face, right? And that's reality. And so it's really hard to like a character that just comes up perfect every time. But that's where I
Mhm.
was in my life. I couldn't allow her to have any flaws. And so I wrote another one, and it was a little better. And then I wrote another one. It was a little better. I met my now husband, who is like my best supporter. He believes in me 100%. He thinks that I walk on water. Like, when it comes to writing, as far as he's concerned, there is no one better. And he really convinced me that I needed to write that story. So I went away to a writer's retreat, and I my process, first of all, I'm a pantster. So I do not write anything out. I had a general concept. I knew how it was going to end. I had my ending. And I had done enough research that I knew that I needed to start it in the 70s for it to make sense in the timeline, and because I needed a spy element, and there was some rebel type activity happening in the early 70s. So that was the perfect time to start this book. And that's all I knew. And I just sat down and I went to this writer's retreat, and then I do what I call word vomit, which is I just let it out. Right. And I don't worry about wordsmithing, and I don't worry if there are little plot holes. And if I get to a character that I know that I named earlier on and now I can't remember, I just describe them and highlight it in yellow and keep going. I don't spend time going back and looking. I often don't get into any more research. If I'm wondering if that can happen, I might make a little comment in the side to remind myself to come back and check and make sure that that could have happened in that time period. Maybe I'm going to have to change something up a little. So I got the first draft done in those 2 weeks while I was gone. And so that was about 55,000 words that I just
Wow.
exploded out onto a page. And then, other than my husband, I didn't let anyone read that. And I let it sit for a while. And then I did some edits on it. And then I really let it sit because I was still in this space of not believing that anything that I wrote could be good enough. Now I'm in a great relationship now, but there's a lot of healing that has to go on when you've lived in an emotionally abusive relationship for 14 years. It's a long time to heal. So my husband and I went on this huge adventure. He has always wanted to ride across the United States on a bicycle. And I wanted to do something big and bold. I thought that what I wanted to do was prove to people that I still had something inside of me. And really what I needed to do was prove that to myself. But, that's like, we could go into a whole 4 or 5 hours of self-exploration there. But while we went across the United States on a tandem bicycle, 3,102 miles from the coast of Oregon to Washington, D.C. And while going across the United States, we raised money for Toys for Tots, and I healed myself. And when I came home, I realized that I could do anything I set my mind to. If me, Teri, a desk jockey, a non-athletic individual, could manage to ride across the United States of America on a bicycle, that I could do anything I put my mind to. And it was a matter of, what did I want to put my mind to? Like, what was it that I wanted to achieve? And I knew what I wanted to achieve was to become an author. And so I got Sunflowers Beneath the Snow back out, and I got it into, and a publisher accepted it, and it came out in 2022. So it was, kind of a crazy way of having it happen. But that story had been written. I just didn't have the courage, I guess, inside. I had been beaten down so many times that it's very hard. That part of the process, getting your book accepted, is very hard. And if you don't feel good about yourself, it's almost impossible, because you hear over and over, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, and so you start to really doubt yourself. Well, if you're already doubting yourself, you quit very quickly. You can't handle that kind of pressure. But at this point, I knew that it was a good story, and that it was just a matter of persistence, and that I was going to find the right way to get that story out. And I did.
I'm just going to take a moment, Teri, and just celebrate you so hardcore right now, because I totally resonate with being in an emotionally abusive relationship and really working to find your voice and find out who you are away from that situation, the healing that it takes to gain that and get that momentum in writing.
It is very hard. So I say that I'm healed, and I am, but still every now and then there's what I call swamp gas. And something will happen. My husband will say something, and immediately I get way down deep kind of feeling that erupts, and I feel intensely angry and upset, like crazy angry, like way beyond what the situation requires, like at most I should say, boy, that sounded a little prickly, but no, I'm feeling, like, oh, and then I recognize, and so that's why I feel like I've really healed, is that I can then go, oh, I know where that's coming from. I know what that is. And then I can very rationally say, so just so you know, I'm having a little moment here. Because when you said this, I immediately felt this. And that's all left over from old stuff. But I did want to kind of let you in on it, that it might be better maybe to avoid that kind of thing for right now, because boy, that's still kind of, but it's good to be able to do that, because for a while I just kind of felt explosive and I didn't even know where it was coming from. And now I can at least, you can say, well, I know what that is. And I also know that it's no longer needed in my life. And then you can kind of like box it back up and put it back away and say, okay, so we don't need that anymore. And that's not to say it won't ever come flying up again, but it flies up less and less often. And if you know what it is, then you can deal with it pretty quickly. It doesn't have to ruin the day or the moment or anything. It can just be oh, that was swamp gas. And then you just shove it off, where it belongs, in the swamp, just go away.
I have never heard of that term before, but I love it.
Well, it's funny. I had a therapist and she's the one that called it swamp gas. And it made such perfect sense to me, because, you're out in the swamp and it looks all nice and still. And all of a sudden, because something underneath is still decaying or whatever. And it does that bubble up. And then maybe there's like a sulfur smell or a something from whatever's happening down below. And it really makes sense, because it's like, it's whatever is bubbling down way deep in a place that you're not even really thinking about or aware of. And then all of a sudden it belches itself out to the surface, and now you're going to have to deal with it, because it's out where everyone can see it, right? And so you have to do something with it. So
at our house, I like to tell my family that I'm Nancy Drewing things, and they know, like, that's usually when something has come up physically, mentally, or emotionally, where I'm like, okay, I thought we were done with this spot. Clearly we're not yet, and there's something new here to look at.
So I'm going to have to like get out my magnifying glass and my notebooks and
That's right. Get the flashlight, go in the cave,
go down in there. What's happening here? Yeah. So that's the way I feel, is that, every now and then those things come up. Usually it's readily apparent to me. It's like, I can immediately go, I know what that is. That reminds me so much of something that used to be said, or how things used to be said. And my response usually towards the end had been to get angry. I was trying to defend myself. And so that instant, defend yourself comes up. And then when I get that instantaneous defend yourself, I now know to stop and think, what are you defending yourself against? And is it necessary? Because most of the time it's not. The assault is not really happening. It's just a leftover emotion from some time past. Every now and then you do have to defend yourself, and it's okay, but it's good to know when it is okay and when you can just kind of let it go, because it wasn't anything actually at all. Yeah. And my husband has gotten used to it too. So he'll laugh, and because I'll say, ooh, I'm feeling some kind of way. And he'll say a little bit of swamp gas, and it's, oh yeah, a little swamp gas, and then we can laugh about it, because it's just what it is, So yeah, so being able to turn it into a joke is also a good thing, because you can then laugh at this thing that used to be a problem and now isn't anymore, So yeah.
Do you find, Teri, that the more that you write, you feel more confident and you gain more in finding your voice?
I think so. It's interesting. So I just wrote my second one, An Enemy Like Me. It's coming out in January, and I'm super excited about that. I still was nervous. Like, what if I'm a one-hit wonder? I can only write one book. There isn't another one in me. What if this is all fake? I got my first editorial review, and it was a good review. And they said, and we see so much growth in her work that
Mm-hmm.
I started to cry, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, I'm not just the one hit wonder. I think most authors have that feeling of, I'm not real. This isn't real. I'm not really an author. If people really knew, that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope I always have it to a small degree, because I think that if you get to the point where you're good, you don't try to get better. And I always want to get better, but I do hope that maybe it's not quite so large and looming, that. And I do feel like this one with Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, it took me 6 months to be able to say out loud, it is a good book. Right? Like, I could say it in my head, but to say it out loud, I would say it's a good book. I mean, it's not like the best American novel, like I'm trying to qualify it. And now I can say it's a good book. It is a good book. And with Sunflowers, I can already say it's a good book. You'll like it. I mean, I think that An Enemy Like Me, if you want to read that book, I think it would be a really good one. You'd enjoy it. And I like having that confidence that it's a good book. Will everyone like it? No, but I don't like every book either, and that doesn't make it a bad book. It means it wasn't the right one for me. And to be able to have that confidence feels really good, especially after 14 years of an emotionally abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to know that what I have produced is worthwhile and people will enjoy it. And that's a good feeling. So
Absolutely. Your title, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, is such a beautiful imagery that you invoke. Why did you choose that title? What does it mean to you?
Okay, well, first, getting to that title, I would have rather written 8 more manuscripts. Okay? I don't know why titles are so hard for me, but I had just named it something to store in my computer. And I had named it Alexandro because he's the first character. Well, that's a horrible title for a book because A, no one can pronounce it, no one can spell it, no one can remember it. Okay, so 3 for 3, it's not a good title. So I sent some titles in. Once they had accepted the book, I sent some titles in. They didn't like them. They sent me some. I didn't like those. And this went back and forth for a month. And I thought that eventually the book was going to be published as There Is No Name for This Book by Teri M Brown. Like, I thought the book is never going to make it out into print because I can't come up with a name. So finally, after lots of back and forth, my editor said, okay, we're getting nowhere. Let's look at the themes of this book, really look at them. And one of the themes is this idea that women continue to find a way to become despite really harsh circumstances. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, so the harsh circumstances in Ukraine would be like their weather, their winter. So we started working on like winter ideas. And then I put in the book later the idea of that first flower that pops up and that's something that I love. I love daffodils because to me a daffodil pops up and says F you to the winter. And even if it snows on top of that daffodil, it's kind of like the last hurrah of winter because it's coming. So I started thinking about, well, what are those first flowers? And none of them really resonated with me. Then I realized, okay, sunflowers are the national flower, but sunflowers in the winter make no sense whatsoever because there are no sunflowers in the winter and they're not a first flower. They're much later before they'll pop up. And then it was like, wait a minute, but the seeds are there and they're waiting, right? So Sunflowers Beneath the Snow to me are these women as well as Ukraine itself as a nation that is enduring this harsh period, but that there will come a point where they're going to be able to bloom and to grow and to become. And so that's kind of where it came from. So Sunflowers Beneath the Snow is finally, and then to think that when all of this happens, now everyone knows that sunflowers are the national flower of Ukraine. So it has, like, it, I couldn't have picked a better title, but the process was crazy. I hated it.
Yeah, titles they're something special.
It's like, how do you get the entire essence of a book into 4 words? Yeah, it was very difficult. I did not like it at all. What's interesting is my next one, An Enemy Like Me, title came to me no problem. Sure, I had it. I had the book about 2/3 done. I knew what we were going to call it. Wasn't a problem at all. I'm writing my 3rd one right now. No idea what I'm going to call it. And I'm starting to have a little bit of PTSD issues,
Each project, man, has its own
it does.
essence and energy. Never goes the same way.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all.
What are you enjoying about book clubs?
So first of all, as you can tell, I love to talk. I love talking about books. Like, I belong to 3 book clubs, personally. I can't always go to all of them, and I don't always get the books read because I'm super busy right now. But I love books. I love to talk. I love the camaraderie of people who also love books. I love talking about my own book. There's just something really wonderful. Plus, I think there's a little bit of, it feels good to hear what other people thought of your book. It doesn't hurt to have a bunch of women sitting in a circle telling you, I loved your book. It's like, it's kind of like, the little pat on your back that you need. But I think though that some of the parts that I've liked the most are when I get a question like, when you wrote this part, were you thinking, and they say something and my mind is like, wow, I wish I had been thinking that, because no, that's not what I was thinking. But isn't it cool that you got that out of that book? So I love to hear what other people picked up that resonated with them that I didn't even recognize, at least on a conscious level, that it was there in doing that thing. And so I love that. It reminds me of going to those English classes where, the teacher would say, now, why did the author make the curtains blue? And as an author now, I think because they needed a color and they looked up and they had blue curtains in their office. And so they put down blue, because more than likely that was the reason. There may not have been anything special, but later, as all of the different things come out in the book, you can start finding things that are there that the author didn't even necessarily mean. But isn't it cool that you can get that kind of, emotion or thought from that? So,
yeah. What's something that's been passed down in generations in your family tree?
Passed down generations. I think the best thing that I could say would be patriotism. My family has always been very strongly patriotic. Like, my dad never went anywhere without a flag. He did old cars. He would restore old cars, and he would go to these car shows, and he would always put a flag up in the corner, by his car. I always grew up with a flag in the yard. I thought everyone had flags in the yards. And then I found out not everyone. I mean, we had a flagpole, like the pole, and had to put it up and down. And so it was very patriotic. There's the stories that I hear. My great grandmother. Yeah. Was apparently a tiny, tiny little woman. And there was some parade going by. And when the military unit, whatever it was, came through, there was a very tall man in front of her who did not remove his hat. And she reached out with her handbag and smacked him. and when he looked at her, she told him, remove your hat. And he did. And so I think that in my family, it's always been very much a, patriotism counts. My grandfather fought in World War II. My dad was in the Air Force. So yeah, I think maybe that's probably one of the things that was passed down. And then another thing would be words, like word games and words and using words and crossword puzzles and words. And so it isn't really surprising to me that I love words. I tell people I collect them because you never know when you can use them. I got a new word on Saturday. Let me see if I can remember it. I think I have it written over here. Hang on. Where did I put it? Oh, here it is. Beshert. Beshert. It's Yiddish, and it means meant to be.
Ooh.
And I loved it.
Huh?
And the lady used it about Sunflowers Beneath the Snow when she found out that it came out 3 weeks before the current crisis. She said, Beshert. And I said, what? And she explained that it was a Yiddish word. And so I wrote it down. And it's hard for me to remember that word because it doesn't sound like anything else that I know, which is why I was going, what is it? What is it? But Beshert. So yeah, I collect words.
I love that too, because it's got like a little like jump almost in the word.
Yes.
And it doesn't, my brain doesn't connect to the meaning with the word, but I like that too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something, I don't know. And in fact, it makes me want to go and start pulling up other Yiddish words and seeing, like, are there other really cool words like that that have that kind of meaning behind them? I love, for instance, German words. There are a lot of German words that are unbelievably fantastic because they take 2 or 3 concepts and put them together and create this word that we don't have in English. There isn't a word in English that means that. And I think, ooh, we should adopt that word because of the idea that it explains this feeling that I'm having, that how else do you explain it in English? Well, you have to give 3 sentences to try to kind of get it across, or you use one German word, right? I like that idea. So yeah, I have a feeling maybe Yiddish has some of that same quality to it. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of Yiddish study.
We're going to take it to the inner child questions segment. Are you ready, Teri?
I don't know. Am I?
I guess we shall see. Okay. First question. What was a gift that you really enjoyed when you were a kid?
So it's really interesting. My favorite Christmas present that I can remember is one that my mother was afraid I wasn't going to like. It came from my grandmother. And on the way to Christmas at my grandmother's, my mom said, now, Teri, when you get your gift from your grandma, I want you to make sure that you're appreciative. She worked really hard. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to get that my mother is this worried about? And what she had made was a China doll. She had bought the head and the hands and the feet, but she had made all of the clothes and stuffed it and did all of the body, and everything else was what she had made for me. And I think I was 12 or 13. And I think my mom thought that I was too old for dolls and that I wasn't going to appreciate it. Well, I appreciated all the work that my grandmother put into it. I still have the doll. Okay, it is faded. It's so sad. Like, I really wish I could bring it back to its former glory. But I have had it with me on display ever since I was 13 years old. And what to me is so interesting is that this was the gift I was warned about. You know, the one about, oh, I hope, make sure that you're appreciative. And it was like, why wouldn't I be? It's unbelievable. My grandmother put all of that love into this gift for me. And I carry it around with me everywhere. Like when I move, it's wrapped up very carefully and put in a box that goes in my car because I want to make sure that it is safe, So that would be it.
I love the whole concept too of the 3 generations of you, your mom, and your grandma, and again, the different perspectives.
Exactly.
That
exactly.
gift. Second question. As a teenager, what was something that annoyed you about your parents that you do now?
Oh, just about everything. Isn't that awful? I remember saying, well, when I grow up, I'm never going to do that to my kids. I think that the biggest thing is saying because I said so. I hated that. I hated it. I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. Don't just tell me because you said so. I want to know why. If you give me a good reason, then I can follow you. But because I said so, and I have said it to my children, and now I'm watching my children say it to theirs. There are times where because I said so is the answer because you do not have the time or the energy or the bandwidth to go into anything else. You just want them to follow the direction. Just do what I said. And so I now understand that. But as a teenager, especially, it was like, because I said so is not an answer. And I will never use it. And I remember the first time it came out of my mouth and I thought, oh, because I said so. Oh no. I've become my mother.
Oh man, yeah, like the whole, calling all your kids different names.
Oh,
or like calling pet names. I was like, why is my parent calling me a pet name? Like, I will never
do that. And
call
then
my
you
kid
have
a name after a dog. And of course, yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I have 4 children. My son is the oldest and then 3 daughters. You'd think I'd at least get his name right. And sometimes I would call him Kimberly. The number of times where I would say, Matthew, Kimberly, you, the one I'm pointing at. It's like, and then sometimes I would call my son my brother's name. And I think, where did that come from? So yeah. Oh.
In good company. High five, Teri. Woo! Third question. What is the oddest food combo that you've liked and tried, or you've just tried?
Oh, I don't eat a lot of odd foods. No, I don't. It's interesting. I was very, very, very picky for a long time. And as I've gotten older now, I'm trying new foods, but they tend not to be odd. I can tell you one that my daughter used to eat all the time, and it's disgusting, but she swore it was good. She ate toast with jelly and mushrooms on top. She called it mushroom jelly toast. Okay. I think that she ate it mostly because her stepfather, the one that was emotionally abusive to me, hated mushrooms, hated them. And I swear that she decided to try that one time, and it bothered him that she ate it, that she continued doing it. I don't even know if she ever felt that it tasted good as much as she just loved the reaction that she got from it. But yeah, mushroom jelly toast. And just thinking about that makes me.
I'm thinking, if you want to be very creative and do a Alice in Wonderland like tea party, that could definitely be a dish you could add.
Oh, I just could never understand how that could taste good. And it was strawberry jelly. So, it was strawberry jelly and these canned mushrooms laid out on the top. And she would eat it. And it was like, oh, yeah.
I am super intrigued because visually I'm like, I don't, but maybe the jelly, maybe.
I don't know. Like, give it a try. Let me know what you think. I personally can't do it. I just wouldn't be able to put it in my mouth. I have a texture thing. I have a real texture. Like, I don't like cottage cheese. And I don't like cottage cheese, and it has nothing to do with the flavor. It has to do with the fact that it's lumpy. And milk products should not be lumpy. So if you get lumpy milk, you throw it away. So I would never want to eat that. Like, there's just something about the fact that it's both smooth and liquidy and lumpy. I can't. Now I've done it before where I've blended it and like put it into my lasagna. If I don't have ricotta, and it's fine, but not lumpy. It can't be lumpy. So yes, there's something about the way the jelly is, and then mushrooms are a little spongy anyway, and so now
Right.
you've got too many textures going. I don't think I could eat it. I don't think I could get it in my mouth. So yeah.
I have a texture thing too. So I'm totally, yes, I'm thinking about all this and processing if I really want to try this or not.
Probably, you can count that as a no thank you, and we would be okay with it.
Before we end today, Teri, can you share with our listeners and viewers what living a creatively abundant life means to you?
To me, it means feeling free to let those things that are in your head out. And not just letting them out, but letting them out in a way that other people can also appreciate them with you. Having the ability to create and then share, and being okay with that sharing process. I think for a while I had that ability to create, but the sharing process part was missing because of fear. And when you can eliminate that fear and get a little more courage, a little more being a little more sure of yourself, because now if someone doesn't like something that I create, it doesn't crush me anymore. I can look at it and say, okay, so they have a different opinion, and that's fine. That's fine. So to get to that space, I think that's when you're being abundantly creative. I think that's the space, is that you can create and you can accept the fact that not everyone will love it, and you're still willing to share it anyway. So
Thank you so much for being here and joining us,
you.
Teri. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I've enjoyed myself thoroughly.
Where can we find you to get Sunflowers Beneath the Snow and hear about your upcoming projects?
So the best way to get up with me is my website. So it's www.terimmbrown.com, and that's Teri with one R. Don't do it with two. You'll never find me. When you're there, you can sign up for my newsletter. You can reach out to me on my contact form. All my social media links are up there. So, I'm kind of on everything. I'm even trying TikTok. Anyone who knows what to do on TikTok that's willing to help me, go ahead and reach out to me, because I don't think I'm doing it right, but that's okay. But you can reach out to me in all of those places. In terms of buying the book, you can get it on my website if you're in the United States, and anywhere else, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much any place online. So
Perfect. Thank you so much,
Thank
Teri.
you.
And thank you for all of those who have watched us live and will be watching us on the replay. Remember, as you go about the rest of your week, to find the things that are working within your life. You are the creator of your own story. What steps are you going to take next? We'll see you right here on Thursday at 10 o'clock a.m. Have a beautiful rest of your week. Thank you, Teri.
Thanks. Bye.